Okay, so what is React? React is a view library. So many people are probably familiar with the concept of MVC, Model View Controller. That's kind of the three letters that rule most of really programming today, especially web programming. Today, or this class, we're really going to focus mostly on the view part. That's because that's the most interesting part of any application. It's where you show the things to the user, it's where the user interacts with things. It's a piece closest to the user, and that's what I think is the most complicated part of most applications. So there are more pieces to React that we'll talk about later in the class. You can integrate a controller using a React router. You can use what would be also maybe a controller with Redux and these things. But for the first bit, we're going to focus only on just kind of the user interface components of your application. Now, I bring up this distinction that it's a view library, because that's probably the first thing that most people say, because one of the first questions is, how does this compare to Angular or other frameworks? So it's not thought of as a framework. So you can use React with any other technology. It's just a part of how to display information. And the question is, why are we learning it? So you heard from Jiren and Hui and myself, that's fun. It's faster to build things. It's also a lot cleaner to build things. In the past, I think front-end code was an afterthought. So, in the early days, it was mostly about complicated server stuff, and then people built user interfaces on top of that. But now, as there's much more focus on user interfaces, really most of the code goes there. It's clear that we need more sophisticated code organizational schemes, and React gives you that. But aside from that, I think a really good reason, and I don't mean to be sarcastic, is that because everyone else is doing it. So React has become a very popular language lately. So there was I didn't include the number here, but last year Stack Overflow did a popularity trending contest. React was by far the winner, I think, like 300% gain over 1 year. It became a very popular library. And the list of clients is pretty impressive. So Airbnb, not to mention Facebook itself, and all these people have invested heavily in React. So it's a good bet to learn something that lots of these great forward-thinking companies are using, because A, it must be good, and B, there's lots of good other support, like tools for it. So people have written lots of great libraries and things like that for React, which makes it a lot better to use. Any other opinions on React?
Yeah, I think it shouldn't be understated that Facebook is backing React. So they're just throwing tons and tons of engineering resources on just making React better, making React Native better. So that's definitely a good thing.
So what can you do with React? So in this class, we'll focus on two main things, which is really let's just say web UIs and mobile apps. So the principles of React work on both platforms. You can also use it to develop desktop apps as well. And who knows what's in the future. Facebook's philosophy here is learn once, develop anywhere. So earlier in the lecture, I said that React is kind of a different way to think than you're used to. But the good thing is once you figure out how to think this way, you'll be able to use it in a lot of different situations. And the way that you have to think, I try my best to come up with maybe like a really short list of why this is a different way of thinking. And this is the two things I came up with. So two things in React that you have to be very aware of and think about are one, state, and two, components. So state is a complicated concept to explain, but whenever I talk about state, it just refers to what has happened in the application. So today, let's see, what's a good example of state, Jiren?
Yeah, one example of state would be all of the tweet data that you displayed in Facebook. So you have a lot of things that display those tweets, but the tweets themselves, the raw JSON data that you're putting in, that is a form of state. So it's something that can change when you retweet something or like something, but generally the way that it's displayed remains the same.
If anyone took computer science classes in college, probably the first thing you all programmed might have been a state machine. So maybe that was an electronics class. So at the end of the day, a computer is supposed to be input and output. The input is the state, and the output is UI or whatever a mobile app or a web page. That's what we're trying to build, a simple in-out system. Another example of state is maybe, the reason why it's important to keep track of state is it's very easy to write complicated programs. You don't know what's happening. So as an example, like this chair is not straight right now. The chair that Jiren is holding is not straight. It should be straight. But why is it not straight?
I don't know what you mean by straight.
Right. It should be like parallel to it should be parallel to this. Right? But various people have been coming, some people have been pushing it, some people have been walking past it. I don't know all the people that have pushed this chair. I can't track why this chair is not the way it's supposed to be. So I can't fix it. A computer program can kind of be like that too. So if you have like a list of tweets where you could get retweeted, someone could delete one, your friend could tweet, like it's very difficult to keep track of all these things. And later we'll talk about good ways to manage all the information in one central place. And React facilitates that. The second thing is components. So it's become very fashionable these days to say composition over inheritance. So back in the past, it was thought that we should have lots of object-oriented programming. We should have subclasses of bigger classes and factories and abstract classes. All these things is kind of the previous programming paradigms. Now people are starting to realize, or starting to say, that it's better to have lots of little things that work together. But each piece by itself is very simple. So if you look at the way that apps are built now in React, what you have is a conglomeration of different components. So now a web page has a header has an image has a caption, things like that. So you break everything down into a series of smaller and simpler pieces.
So you want to focus in on the functionality of something. So whereas before you would have like a van that inherits from a car and adds like a little bit of functionality to the car. Now you instead have things like, it has 4 wheels, it's drivable. It focuses in more on like small behaviors that can come together and form something instead of, here's a bunch of behaviors, let's modify some of these behaviors to do something. That kind of makes sense.
And now this stuff is hard to explain, and that's why we like to do a lot more code than just slides. So this is the last slide we have today. And the main now technical concepts or coding concepts you have to learn. One is this new language invented for React, which is JSX. It's an optional thing, so you don't have to program in JSX. You could write everything we do, we could have written in plain JavaScript. That would be very inconvenient and like not fun. So here we have JSX. It's just a way to make your UIs look just like kind of regular HTML. So you have a Pokemon. For example, here's a Pokemon. It has a name attribute, a stats attribute, and these curly braces that you have seen in the pre-work, everything inside there is executed code. So that's where your JavaScript kind of mixes with the markup language. And the other technical concept, is the distinction between props and state. Props is short for properties, and those refer to static properties of something that cannot change. So this Pokemon, for example, its name is just its name. And that won't change. Whereas state can change. So state refers to, for example, in the pre-work you had like a text box where people could type in letters. That is something that changes, that belongs in state. But the behaviors it takes, for example, what happens when you press the submit button, that doesn't change for that button. Okay. So that is a lot to kind of go over, and it will hopefully become more clear as I go through a code walkthrough, which is next. So the way the code walkthroughs are generally going to work is I'll program something from the start, and I'll kind of get to an endpoint. And the idea is that you can follow along. You might be able to follow along with your typing, but you might not. if you can't follow along, don't worry, because there's a video, and B, you should still be able to absorb a lot by just watching someone type. Kind of the big thing I want to show to you guys is that there's no magic here. I'm typing everything from scratch. I don't do a lot of copy and paste. I don't do a lot of cloning from starter projects. I try to do it as bare metal as possible. If you have questions while I'm typing something, you can also always ask. Say, hey, how did you do that? Why did you do that? And I'll try to slow down and explain myself along the way and say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Especially with JavaScript and React, I'll try my best to use the newer language features. So I'll use a lot of this stuff called ES6 and a few ES7 things. So that refers to the language version of JavaScript, which is kind of the new thing. So it's slowly becoming adopted, I guess, across the board. Whereas before we were using ES5, and that's been around for, I don't know, 10 years or something. So if you have learned JavaScript in the past in like college or something, some new things may be confusing to you. And if that is confusing, please stop and ask. So it's something I struggle with too, is kind of learning the new syntax of JavaScript. Now, the thing we'll be building for the homework 1 is a simple movie browser. So if anyone's gone to IMDb or 123film, they've seen this. We'll build a simple version of this too. This is my basic example, and you can search for stuff, showing you the main parts of React. Your solution, of course, can be much more beautiful than this. That assignment is explained, what to do about the assignment, how to submit it and things is explained here in our course portal. So everyone now in this class should have access to this URL. Learning.coderschool.vn. So if you type that in your browser, actually Jeremy might not have access. So everyone except Jeremy. Wi-Fi password, yes. It's
Make it matter.
The M and the I and the M
So we call this the course portal. Yeah, MATTR. This says all the information you should need for a class. You'll only see week 1 because you're in week 1. There's a link to the slides. There's some small notes here. There's some articles I thought were interesting here. People still Wi-Fi. But you'll see the assignment tab here. This is where your homework assignment is detailed. So I might make some small tweaks to this as the week goes on, but it's going to be relatively the same. So sorry if I do change 1 or 2 things, but it won't be anything major. So the original inspiration for this is from the movie database. This is their version. We'll try to build something like this. This is the original. And I think that in maybe 5-10 hours, you can build something even better than this, than a real, American website. So one thing is, please read the instructions for how to submit assignments here. And a big one that not a lot of people did for their pre-work is to create a readme.md for your GitHub repository. And there's a checklist. So copy and paste this file into your readme.md, and then you can mark things off in GitHub of the things you've completed. And that helps the graders know what you've done and what you haven't done. And also knows when you're finished. So to be done with this homework assignment, you have to do all these things here. Any questions about the homework? Okay, actually, so since people are getting Wi-Fi and stuff, how about we just take a quick 5-minute break. Let me get reset up on my workspace as well, and I'll go through the first couple pieces of this. this new React app that we'll build. So it's 7:50 right now. We'll start at 7:55.